Hello, and welcome to episode 9 of the Beyond Michigan podcast. The compromise leading to Michigan's acquisition of the Upper Peninsula, the ceding of the Toledo Strip, and to Michigan's statehood proved pivotal to Michigan's long-term and short-term economic growth. A congressman from Missouri named Thomas Hart Benton proposed a compromise to put this territory dispute into the past. The compromise would give Michigan the remainder of the Upper Peninsula in exchange for giving up the Toledo Strip. This compromise would be passed in April of 1836, the same month the Wisconsin Territory was established and signed into law by Andrew Jackson in June of 1836. The establishment of the Wisconsin Territory rested on the assumption that Michigan would accept the deal, because Wisconsin's northeastern border would be set as the Menominee River and the Montreal River, which, note that thanks to the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 and the later law that made Michigan a territory in 1805, gave Michigan the eastern portion of the Upper Peninsula, which includes Sault Ste. Marie and the land next to the Straits of Mackinac and basically everything in between. So reactions were mostly negative, with the Detroit Free Press describing the region as, quote, a region of perpetual snows of our national domain in the north, end quote. This can be compared to the reaction of the purchase of Alaska, Seward's icebox. People wanted it to be its own territory / state named Huron instead of being part of Michigan. This sentiment was also true for people of the Upper Peninsula. They didn't want to be part of Michigan, provided that there was no immediate physical connection from the UP to the Lower Peninsula. Evidently, these reactions showed that they knew little about what the Upper Peninsula held. Douglas Houghton, on an expedition in 1840 through Lake Superior, described the Upper Peninsula as, quote, all this region was wild and solitary as a century earlier. Probably the whole region did not number 1,000 souls, which kind of retroactively helps their cases of it being effectively a barren wasteland. After 2 conventions and 6 days between them, Michigan would accept the compromise on October 26, 1836, with Whigs who boycotted the second convention, dubbing it the, quote, frostbitten convention, end quote, and the legality of it. Michigan would become a state on January 26, 1837, with Andrew Jackson signing it into law. And by the middle of April 1837, 3 months after Michigan gained statehood, Dr. Douglas Houghton was appointed to be a state geologist. At the time, there were indications of mineral wealth in Michigan, presumably referring to the Lower Peninsula, but nothing concrete. His legacy is so vast that there's a city named after him in the Upper Peninsula, which hosts Michigan Technological University, who were originally named something along the lines of the Michigan Schools of Mines at its founding in 1885. There's also a residence hall named after him in this university, along with the county in which Houghton's city is the county of Houghton. In 1839, in his state geologist report to the state, Dr. Houghton says that iron and kidney ore may have been found, but he was not yet certain if it was definitively iron ore, and that more testing would have to be done to confirm his hypothesis. The same is true for copper ore in his 1840 report of the state geologist. Ultimately, Douglas Houghton would pass away from drowning in Lake Superior. The Lake Coombe doesn't give up her dead, and October of 1845 during a violent storm. As a direct result of his findings, among other things, there was a copper rush starting circa 1843. This mining opportunity led to a large influx of European migrants, like the Cornish people of England, who are responsible for pasties being a thing in the Upper Peninsula, along with other people from other states. With the California gold rush still yet to come, 2 East Coast mining companies returned 1% of their investments in 1844 in what has been dubbed the first serious American mining attempt. Throughout the early and mid-1900s, there were many strikes for varying reasons. For example, there was a strike starting in mid-1913 with the Michigan National Guard having to be sent to deal with the workers and what they were doing, including but not limited to beating other miners who did not participate in the strike. The reasoning behind the strike was due to unequal treatment from American and immigrant employees, the latter having been treated worse than the American miners. The more infamous 1968-69 Copper County strike started due to the company they were working for, Calumet and Hecla, being bought by Universal Oil Products. Regardless of the details of these two strikes, I'm sure among others in the Keweenaw Peninsula's history of copper mining, the economic impact was very much there. Up until the strike in 1968, over 10,000 pounds, or 5 million tons, of copper ore were mined from the region. Ultimately, President George H.W. Bush would establish the Keweenaw National Historic Park in 1992, and the last mine on the peninsula would close in 1997, 5 years later. 10 million pounds equates to more than $1.5 billion being sold in the Keweenaw Peninsula, this $1.5 billion being through 1945. So there was obviously quite a bit more that was made after the fact. And not to mention, in 1855, the Soo Locks opened, making trade from Lake Superior easier, including the copper ore mined in the Keweenaw Peninsula. For example, 120,000 tons of copper ore, or 240 million pounds, were sent through the Soo Locks. While the Soo Locks weren't necessarily directly impacted by the Toledo War, its construction served as a vital economic impact for the copper industry and the Keweenaw Peninsula, which was acquired thanks to the Toledo War. There is no underestimating how much it impacts the economy nowadays, even with known incidents like the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald on November 10th of 1975. There were other economic impacts that came from the Toledo War that people may not directly connect to it. The Upper Peninsula is home to a decent tourist industry centered around Mackinac Island and Marquette, the latter having been acquired from the Compromise. In short, the uncertainty about how far the southernmost tip of Lake Michigan led to a border dispute between Ohio and Michigan for 20 years that culminated in Michigan receiving most of the Upper Peninsula in return for giving up their claim to the Toledo Strip. With a lot of unknowns about Michigan's geologic wealth, Douglas Houghton became the state's first state geologist and explored the Upper Peninsula, where he found what could be copper in the Keweenaw Peninsula. This in turn led to a mining boom, the first in U.S. history, that resulted in over $1 billion in revenue by 1945 and over 10 billion pounds being extracted from the Keweenaw Peninsula by 1968. The Soo Locks opening in 1855, while not directly linked to the land acquired from the Toledo War, played a pivotal role on how fast the copper could be sent elsewhere, which thus reduced expenses in sending this ore elsewhere. Today, there is a large tourist economy in the Upper Peninsula centered around the Mackinac Island and Marquette, the latter being in the land that Michigan got for giving up the Toledo Strip. I'm Justin. That's Justin behind the camera. There's always something to learn.